So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find the 61st chapter related with the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. We find also then the economies of the world going through then a transition from what they used to know as far as the Babylonian system versus then the direct trade given then thousands upon thousands of people throughout the world jobs, and they can become their very own bankers and also investors. At this moment then is very imperative understanding the situation regarding then so many people without jobs. It is very also imperative understanding the Creator then provided them with very easy jobs as long as they understand what a computer is and basics of investment. And then many of the people that are uneducated must start educating themselves, at least with computerized systems, where then the existing monetary system is becoming virtual. There are some people around the world trying then to discredit the direct trade, thinking themselves as then being a threat to the existing system. From the viewpoint of these people then, since they want to cling to their junkies of the past, of the Babylonian system, where they make regular people slaves of the system, where these people then they think only because they have some sort of a certificate of some junky courses of their own, then they use those junky certificates as a means of a stick of slavery. This is what the Babylonians then, or the Babylonian system, is trying to impose upon the people. Well, bad news. The system is truly changing and must become then a computerized trade, so that many people can become then acquainted of what's coming. It is also imperative for those people of the Pacific, the islanders for instance, they are becoming more and more educated, they are understanding computerized systems, they are understanding the riches of their islands and of their resources, and they can do direct trade themselves. That's the great news. They don't have to become dependent upon a group of people anymore with a piece of paper lording over them. They can do themselves. As long as they are educated in computerized systems and understand then the very basics of then online trade, they can do trade themselves. Absolutely 100%, and the new system provides them what then is required. Let's evaluate then as far as the Pacific. Some time ago, over 2 months ago, there were then many islands and many people of the Pacific enjoying then a period of time of direct trade excitement. And they knew it was coming. And it is coming yet. So then let's then evaluate the importance of then pushing forward the understanding of direct trade. As then the islanders, they can do themselves their own trade, they can organize themselves, and they can pay their own government via online. So it is truly very handy. As long as then they become acquainted of the virtual monetary system, and then must be taught properly, so then they can invest later in the system. These would prevent the Babylonian system to try to enslave them as they have done for many years. There is a very big push from the West of maintaining the Babylonian system and enslaving the people. This means a civilized slavery. Because as we understand in our country, in USA, only a few people, only a group of people, they share then the benefits of the best and not given to anybody else. That's why then the 12 digits investors in this country, they are dumping American stocks because they understand this system wants to enslave the people. And by doing so, the military increases, The government then increases. It becomes a monstrosity as it is, and absolutely without control. And the worst of these, they are control freaks. You find the United States joining up with Japan, joining up with Australia, trying to go over there to New Zealand, try to go over there to Panama. So they try to secure those areas for their own use. So then let's try to compare the situation as it was during the time of United States in Cuba. Cuba then was obviously an extension of United States. So they put over there Fulgencio Batista. He was a military dictator, a scoundrel, and he then nearly enslaved his own people. Very grandly later, Mr. Castro then came over and had taken over the island and then restored the balance. So then at this time, let's be very clear and understand. If the Babylonian system, they get their way, you can be absolutely sure those tiny countries, they are going to become a slave. And then chances are this country then being ruined in the next 36 months as it was predicted. They're not only ruining Japan and Australia if they are not smart, and then the other countries, they have no way of developing themselves. However, there is a problem. We find then in Daniel the 11th chapter where you find from the instructions. You find the relationship of the kingdom of the north and kingdom of the south, namely then the Soviet Union rebirthing and Africa. Africa is the southern kingdom. And this relationship is going to secure then the trade or direct trade of China. There is no danger in the system. As long as there is a tracking record of transactions, you can be absolutely sure that government can be regulated. The situation is, leaders of these countries, because they are so scoundrels, they understand that their days are then drawing to a close. They understand that their system is going to be computerized and it must be monitored. They are trying to push for the Babylonian system. The problem is it's not going to work. It's not going to work because the new system provides jobs for others where they can maintain their own government. And this truly is done via the simple fact of having banking online and then investment online. So people can purchase, they can invest, they can receive, they can send payment. And as long as then the local government is related directly with direct trade, then each person registered can contribute directly with the government. And then if the job does not get done, they can get rid of the entire government and place somebody else. That's the advantage of having direct trade. However, the leaders of the nations, they are absolutely deadly afraid of it, because they won't be able to live as kings anymore. They understand they are not capable of governing. That's why then people are deadly scared of it, because the people have then discovered the true power of them placing people in charge and remove them from charge. So then with this in mind, let's evaluate then as far as trade. The trade of the Pacific must become worldwide. The reason why? It's because the Ishmaelites are waiting for their authority, and they will receive. The situation of time. As then the market is presenting itself with more volume of trade, you find then many countries already investing in many areas of direct trade. You find upgrading of broadbands. You find an extension of internet. You find then people being aware of direct trade. These must then turn out at the end as then volume of freighting. However, there is a problem. There is the West then trying to interfere and try to enslave the people. So then we find from the instructions, must remain then intact. the relationship of the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. We understand the enforcer of the new system is then the BRICS. While then in the European Union they are wallowing around themselves until they get dismantled. And then the North America, until North American system is removed out of the world's market as a means of exchange, and then becoming a means of exchange for the country itself. Then we understand the importance of retrieving and rebuild. So then we can become participants when the new system comes. This country, however, they don't observe the situation as being participants. They try to take over. Control freak. So there is a distinction of then making friendships for the purposes of taking over versus those nations who are then becoming participants of the system. Thus we understand then the relationship of the kingdom of the north and south. We understand the relationship of the east and the northern kingdom. And importantly also is then Cuba. Very important. The Cuban people, they are the very balanced point where then you find a route from the northern kingdom and the stabilization of the Americas, because there is a problem also. The Mercosur system of the South Americans is also at danger. Not only we understand that the Southern American Mercosur also must be dependent upon then the riches of northern Brazil, and then its transports going from northern Brazil then to Panama. Since Brazil does not have enough ships yet for the great time of mining and transportation of raw materials, it is becoming increasingly important then the strategic point of Panama. Then we understand the eastern side of the Soviet Union wanting desperately development, where then these raw materials, not only then from Africa, but then later from Brazil, becoming available then in Panama for transportation north, and then the smelting of these materials, and then the transfer then of these materials after smelting, so then China can produce, becoming then obviously the Chinese protected from any kind of a Babylonian invasion, system-wise. So then, based from these understandings, there is then the danger of being caught in this Babylonian system where then nations absolutely certainly they will to destroy themselves. We understand from the outcome of Daniel, the bell and the dragon has its way at the end. And the reason being is, when Daniel was explaining of the ending of the going to and fro of the 1,000 years of deceit, thus devilish time, ended in 2009. We've entered the time of the dragon. Thus then direct trade, and also the time of knowledge, increasing of knowledge for the purposes of trade, computerized trade. So then the midman can be eliminated. But then the midman provides fuel for these scoundrels of the existing leadership. The leadership, they are not capable, and they understand they are not. So they depend themselves then from these midmen, scoundrelization and manipulation of the market. So the situation is they won't be able to get their way anymore. We have a schedule. Daniel the 11th chapter must become very evident, and it is becoming. Then we find the relationship of Cuba and the Soviet Union. Very important, a fact of having a reunion with the Cuban leaders and also the Soviet Union leaders. They must come up with an understanding. Then in turn comes the relationship of then the Kingdom of the North and Kingdom of the East, already spoken of before. Does not mean the 11th chapter then includes Cuba. It's not. The point is, after understanding the relationship of North and South, a couple of chapters later the relationship of the East and North and East and South, then it was explained before the system of the BRICS. The BRICS is then the initiation of the system of direct trade. In order for these then become protected, you have to have a link in the Americas. Thus Cuba. Comes the relationship of the Cuban people with the Northern Kingdom, as it used to be in the past. Then you find the importance of New Zealand becoming a trading post. Then direct trade from China and New Zealand, and obviously the Southern Island, becoming then a post or a military posting of the Chinese military for the purposes of protection of the system, for participation, not competition and taking over. In the West is always taken over by force, forcing other people out and trying to take over as control freaks. It's not going to work. So let's understand then the importance of the New Zealand government making a relationship with China and establishing then a Chinese military base. It's extremely important. Then the BRICS also, because of these, must have a link up with New Zealand and Cuba, thus becoming then a balanced system. So then when we read Daniel, Bel and the dragon, then we understand what it means. Then this system provides jobs for thousands of people, as long as they are educated with computer, the basics of it, and then understanding payment, sending payment, receiving payment of their own very trade. Those people living in islands where they have mineral riches, they are no longer dependent upon a company to come and do the job. They can go and dig themselves. As long as they understand the importance of ships, of then standard freighting containers, they can dig out those rocks themselves, they can clean them up and throw them in a container. And they can then get paid online. As long as they have an email and then a link with PayPal, very simplistic system, they can get paid via PayPal, the direct trade. So then, for instance, the islands, they are involved with past minings, for instance, abandoned mines. They can dig out the minerals themselves. They don't have to wait for a systematic, politicized, environmentally friendly way of doing it. They do as Africa is doing for a long time. They get picks, they get shovels, and they dig out the ores, they inspect them, and they send them. And then obviously those people involved with mining should have at least some sort of centralized place where they can at least make sure they have the proper records of it. But they can get paid online. But this system must be under the control of the Chinese. At least where those ores they should go, where they should be smeltered, has to have some sort of light management. At least we understand then where the flow of the events are coming from. So the nations, they are no longer required of having their own countries being run by a group of scoundrels, because they have proven themselves incapable of making decisions. The problem is we are coming out of a time where then for so many centuries these junky traditions was then from a generation to generation, and they have been then obviously used to these junky systems. As you can understand, they're trying to impose once again. It's no longer time for it. So if the politicians then are somewhat concerned with the situation, they can try to find something else to do. Because direct trade must be established and willed. We understand this because the Messiah already said in the future. So let's be very focused in what we hear these days and be very, very acquainted with the monitoring of shortwave stations, because you find the truth. Via radio you truly find the truth. So then whatsoever is posted in this new way of media, computer and television, it became a mockery. This Babylonian system has infiltrated the media. The media became unreliable for the most part. They have joined up with local governments. They are lying. They don't speak the truth. They hide it. As we in America have then testified ourselves. Our government has lied to ourselves. Ourselves as being the American citizens, we were lied. And this country has made preparations for the economical ruin of the future. But they are trying to portray themselves as strong players yet in the world, where then they have faltered in an area. The BRICS system, they have their own banking. So then the system of the East then is protected. There is absolutely no way for this Secretary of State going around speaking junk. The same as our President going to Panama. The same as Holder going to New Zealand. They are wasting their time. The BRICS system already has started, and it won't stop. So then China must then evaluate what they are expecting from the situation. Because the more they wait, the worse it gets. Because these countries joining up together under this Babylonian system, they have an aim only. They are cashing their future in this gamble where they understand it's not going to work. Japan must think very soberly and twice plus if they want to remain where they used to be. Because then when our nation then ruins itself because of the lack of management, then Japan is nearly gone. Australia has a chance yet if Tony takes over the leadership over there. So let's evaluate what we are gambling with. Plus then, understandably, when China then establishes as a military base in the South Pacific for the means of trade only, making a patrol posting same as in Cuba, then we understand the importance of direct trade. Then we find the volume of packages and freighting and ships, the upgrading of the ports, and absolutely disregard what America is doing, because it's absolutely nonsense. We've become a nation of control freaks. We don't know what to do. We are cashing our future. Our economy is not under the control. Unemployment is rampant. Our system is broken. our economy is bankrupt. So Japan is on its way to destruction. And Australia best is watch out. And China can absolutely, certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, at the moment, straightforward of making a relationship with the Northern Kingdom. So the faster they do it, the least they are exposed then to threats from the West. Because there are already people in Panama try to establish a U.S. military base. That's what precisely Holder is doing in New Zealand. The pretense is then some sort of a partnership of security or cyber security. As far as Israel, it's not relevant at the moment. Israel is not tabernacling. They're mere another nation. But the more they are involved with the Syrians, the worse it gets for them. Whatsoever they do against returns back to them. So the main topic at the moment is understanding then Panama. Panama then becomes then the gateway of the reaches of the South. But in order then the Northern Kingdom become then benefited from this system, Cuba must be active. This means receiving provisions from the Northern Kingdom, becoming an active posting, patrol posting. Cuba has a great chance of becoming once again a great nation. That's why then Mr. Castro's system has held for so long. And many times Mr. Castro felt his system would be then revitalized. This time is it. Reading from some of his talks during the time of the Cold War, he knew what Che Guevara was doing was beyond his time. So if he would retreat from the time he said those words, this truly is the time where then a balance of the world then is established, where nations they have then a future of direct trade. And these would be obviously enforced when then China hires the services of the Northern Kingdom. The only reason for the Soviet Union to become then greater than the first status is the relationship with China. Soviet Union becomes then a filtering system of the Babylonian side of Daniel, Bel and the Dragon. Then you can expect the joining up of forces of the military of China and the Soviets combining forces. You find patrols in the South Pacific, in the Americas. And no intervention from the West should be then exercised. They can watch each other, but those nations making decisions of doing direct trade with China must be then respected. Because it's not an arms race. It is simply protecting those nations wanting to do direct trade with China. As JFK then mentioned during the time of the Cuban crisis, the enemy ships coming to Cuba with arms during the time of the Cold War, during the time of the Cuban crisis, should be driven back. But this time we are speaking then a participation of protection of cargo ships, protection of those countries wanting direct trade with China. Thus then a basic military base in Cuba it is then required for the purposes of patrols. And the United States must back away from it. So the days of manipulation of this country then is over. We are during new times, where then we read the instructions for what they are. Then we understand the very important balance. When we read then Daniel's writings of Babylonian system, filtered through the Northern Kingdom, and direct trade via China as the dragon.